On a quiet evening in the bustling city of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a secretive relationship between a devoted Muslim woman, Samira, and her father-in-law, Faisal, spiraled out of control, leading to a tragic event. This relationship, which began as a shadowy affair during family gatherings, eventually escalated into a violent confrontation that ended with the loss of a life and forever changed the lives of those involved. Samira, a 28-year-old mother of two, lived a seemingly perfect life with her husband Faiz in Riyadh. Their modest but cozy home reflected the hard work they had put into creating a comfortable life for themselves and their children. Faiz, a successful businessman, was known for his busy schedule and frequent travels to neighboring countries. But he always provided for his family, ensuring they had everything they needed. However, behind closed doors, Samira and Faye had a secretive relationship that slowly began to unravel. The tension between them grew and eventually led to a violent argument that resulted in the death of Faiz and forever altered the lives of all those involved. Samira felt more and more emotionally empty as time passed. She had been married to Faisal when she was only 15, and for 20 years their relationship had been arranged by their families, like many marriages in their culture. In the early years, their union was respectful and based on mutual responsibilities and traditions. However, as time went on, their closeness began to fade. Faisal became more distant, immersed in his business, and his absences could last from several days to weeks. At home, he was fully occupied with work, leaving Samira to run the farms and raise the children alone. Despite her desire to remain faithful to her religious duties, Samira's heart was torn by loneliness. She was a deeply religious woman for whom cultural and religious roles were the most important life guidelines. She gave herself to the elderly by instilling the right values in them, but gradually she began to realize the emptiness of her life, settling in her soul. Samira lacked not only an emotional connection with her husband, but also simple human warmth. During one of these lonely periods in early 2008, her father-in-law, Amir, began to attract her attention more and more often. Amir was a different person from her husband in many ways. He had a sharp mind and the ability to command respect, unlike her husband, who rarely noticed changes in his wife's mood. He paid attention to details and saw how the distance between Samira and his son was increasing. Although he never spoke directly about it, he noticed it and tried to help. Initially, their conversations were brief, but over time, their communication became more personal. Amir found reasons to talk to Samira more often, even during family meetings. He stayed with her longer and tried to understand her better. Despite his cautious nature, something inexpressible began to grow between them, a connection they both felt but were afraid to admit. In early 2010, their relationship began to change. Character. From family to something much more dangerous, the fleeting glances they exchanged over dinner became longer and longer, and their conversations became more personal. Amir noticed how Samira's eyes lit up when he complimented her, and how she leaned slightly towards him during the conversation. Samira, feeling forgotten and deprived of attention from Faisal, found solace in Amir's care. He seemed to understand her in a way her husband never could. He listened to her with patience and made her feel comfortable, valuable as she had not felt in many years. Despite his age and position in the family, Amir could not resist the temptation of forbidden desire. Realizing Samira's vulnerability, he began to subtly manipulate the situation, convincing her that their communication was innocent, just conversations between father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Still, he knew that there was something more. More and more was going on. By the middle of the year, their meetings became more and more secretive. Amir found excuses to come to his son's house on days when he knew Faisal wouldn't be there. They met in secluded corners of the house, behind closed doors, carefully avoiding the eyes of children and other family members. Every time Samira promised herself that it would be the last time, the temptation grew stronger with each secret date. Her faith was further complicated by the fact that she found herself changing her religious principles. She prayed at night, asking for strength and forgiveness, but the cycle of temptation continued for months. Their meetings became riskier. They began meeting in deserted places, in parks at sunset, or in remote areas of the family estate. It seemed to them that their secret was safe, that no one would ever find out. But in fact, they began ignoring the obvious signs of impending danger. Although she tried to maintain her composure, Samira was becoming increasingly worried. The appearance of a devoted wife and mother seemed to be changing. Samira, who was often busy looking for her files, began to become more withdrawn, and her conversations with her husband grew shorter and colder. He attributed this to her fatigue from running the household, but suspicions began to arise in his mind. By the end of 2011, rumors began spreading within the family about Samira and Amir's secretive glances during family gatherings. Faisal's younger sister noticed these glances and shared her concerns with Faisal, who initially dismissed her words. The seed of doubt was sown at the beginning. In 2012, things became unbearable. Samira, torn by guilt and her feelings, was caught in a web of lies. Every interaction she had with Amir felt like walking on a tightrope. She knew it was a delicate balance, but she didn't realize that disaster was inevitable. A secret relationship, known only to them, began to gain attention by the middle of summer 2012. Over time, the secret became more and more difficult for Samira. The burden of betrayal began to eat away at her from the inside. She distanced herself from Faisal, her husband, and the feelings she once had for him. It became harder and harder to look him in the eye, knowing that every conversation was riddled with deceit. Faisal noticed changes in her behavior, despite his own frequent absences. Samira, always attentive and involved, became distracted, as if her mind was elsewhere. Her thoughts were somewhere far away. The warmth she showed to him even during his long absences gradually faded. At first, Faisal tried to ignore his suspicions. After all, they had been married for more than 10 years, and he had always fully trusted Samira. But more and more often, he noticed how she avoided physical contact. Her smile became strained, and conversations at family dinners were short and insincere. The secret that initially surrounded their relationship was replaced by reckless audacity. He found reasons to stay alone with Samira, especially in those moments when he knew Fila was not at home. Family meetings became a real test for Samira, because the network of lies that she was weaving became more complicated by the end of 2012. Her behavior became impossible to ignore. Faisal, concerned by her aloofness, began to watch her closely, noticing how often she looked away when he tried to talk to her. In the end of 2013, rumors began to circulate within the family about Amir and Samira's interactions during family dinners. Aisha, Amir's sister, was always suspicious of their behavior. She overheard a muffled conversation between them and was alarmed by what she heard. Her remarks stayed with her for several weeks. In February 2014, when the phone rang, Faisal, Amir's father, became more suspicious and began to monitor Samira's actions. He noticed that she was becoming increasingly withdrawn. Amira and Amir eventually revealed the truth, leaving Faisal with years of betrayal in the form of evidence of their relationship. His world collapsed that night, and he sat in silence, reflecting on what he had seen. He felt a mixture of rage and betrayal, but did not immediately confront them. Faisal decided to wait, choosing the moment to leave. His anger at both of them had turned the house, which had previously served as his quiet refuge, into a real-time bomb. On March 6, 2014, the silence of the house was disrupted by a life-changing event. The setting sun painted the room in warm colors for all its inhabitants, but the tension that had been a companion to his long doubts settled in his soul, depriving him of peace even in his own house. Returning home, he put down his briefcase and froze in the house. His sister was alarmed, but the house wasn't empty from the guest room, usually reserved for his father during visits. Muffled voices could be heard. Faisal's heart began to beat faster, and his old suspicions surfaced with renewed vigor. Outgrowing explanations of what was happening, pushing the door ajar, Faisal froze, looking inside. A scene appeared before him that destroyed his whole world instantly. His wife, Samira, was with another man. Faisal was in the arms of his father, Amir. At that moment, time seemed to stop. The pain of betrayal and anger gripped him, not only from his wife, but also from his father. The person he trusted the most had betrayed him in the worst possible way. His body reacted faster than his mind could process what he saw, and an outburst of uncontrollable anger overwhelmed him. He burst into the room with a voice that was usually restrained and calm, but now it sounded furious. Samira involuntarily recoiled, humiliated and distressed from the pain. Faisal lost control of himself and tried to say something, but his words disappeared in a storm of rage. The conflict engulfed them instantly. Blinded by pain, Faisal grabbed an ornate knife from the wall like a family heirloom and rushed at Amir, stabbing him with the knife. Each blow was the embodiment of his disappointment and pain, and Amir, once a symbol of strength and authority, was now helpless. The man collapsed to the ground, bleeding, and the floor and carpet beneath him turned red. His life was cut short. Her screams cut through the silence of the house, but Faisal barely heard her. Overwhelmed by what he had done, he fell to the floor. The knife dropped from his hand with a thud, hitting the bloody floor. The neighbors heard the noise and called the police, unaware of what had happened. When the police arrived, they saw Faisal lying on the floor covered in blood. Samir was arrested on March 8, 2014. The news of the incident shocked the local community. A respected businessman and family man, he was accused of a secret relationship with his wife's father. The details quickly spread, destroying his reputation. On March 20th, the investigation had irrefutable evidence of Faiz's guilt. Salah and he were charged with murder, and the court became a place of fierce debate and public condemnation. The details of the betrayal shocked everyone who knew the family. Despite the severity of what he had done, Faisal was viewed as a person who was extremely naive. After 15 years in prison, Samira, who caused this tragedy, was left alone to bear the burden of the consequences. The court considered her the true culprit of this tragedy, as her involvement in the affair and betrayal of her husband and family were seen as the root cause of all the events that led to violence. She was sentenced to death, but her life was saved thanks to a plea from the prosecution. Despite the reasons to hate Samira, there were also reasons to understand her actions. Her life had been filled with struggles and challenges that may have led her to make decisions she regrets. It's important to remember that no one is without flaws, and everyone has the potential to make mistakes. The court was unable to sentence Samira to death, and instead, based on his request, the court commuted her sentence to a 10-year prison term. However, this act of mercy could not restore the broken marriage, and the bonds that once bound them were now irrevocably severed. Samira's reputation, which had been considered exemplary, was damaged beyond repair by society's rejection of her as the main cause of the tragedy that had destroyed not just one life, but an entire family. The family that was once the foundation of society was left in ruins after the death of Amir, and the betrayal and subsequent murders left scars that will never heal. Faisal, who escaped the death sentence, will live with the weight of what he has done, isolated from his children and the world he once knew. Eventually, their story became a lesson to others, a warning about the destructive power of betrayal, desire, and uncontrollable anger that was once a family united by traditions and respect turned into nothing, into a bitter memory that was destroyed beyond recognition. The tragedy that played out on the evening of March 6, 2014 will remain with them for the rest of their lives. In 2015, Samira was left alone, thinking about the decisions that led to the destruction of her family. The severity of her guilt is comparable only to the loneliness she feels after losing her husband and father-in-law. Their marriage, once concluded in the spirit of tradition, now remains only a memory broken by betrayal and bloodshed. What awaits Samira? Will she ever be able to earn forgiveness in the eyes of society? Or will she forever remain marked by the sins of her past? The case of a secret affair between a Muslim wife and her husband's father is a tragic reminder of how even the most sacred bonds can be destroyed by betrayal. This story will be remembered as a tragedy, soaked in shame and remorse. Do not forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss our future updates.